So I went to see the Odyssey. This is going to be my first movie review for this channel. I got my little notes right here to kind of walk through a little bit, just kind of my thoughts from seeing this movie. First initial thought, man, this movie is like exactly what the cinema experience is supposed to be. Like, I would encourage anyone who plans on going to see this movie to not wait until it comes out on streaming and to watch it in your from your living room, unless you got like some insane home theater or surround sound, whatever. But I think this movie is legit made to go and see within the theaters. Odyssey was epic, fantastical, marvelous in every way, from the sound design to the visuals to the just everything. Like, Christopher Nolan is a genius of a director. Just his innovation, traveled to multiple different continents, boots on the ground, filming in these specific places, like they built the boats and they were on the sea, getting shots on the sea, and that is something that is just very not common today. I mean, most movies that are coming out, they have a massive set, Hollywood movie set, and they're just building and using CGI for whatever. But Christopher Nolan, he's still using these practical things to still film these movies. And man, I think we're really seeing, like, this year has just been phenomenal for movies so far, and I think we're really seeing this resurgence back to movies, right? Like how they made us feel with the rise of Marvel, and after it got super popular, we kind of see this like fabricated, cheap, soulless, just fast fashion, if I should say, for lack of better words, like Sheen-esque movies be released, right? And they're just churning them out with the goal of just making money. Why I love directors like Christopher Nolan, they bring us back to just the original idea of movies, man, just to tell story. And it makes so much sense that he does this with the Odyssey, right? It's just I talked about it in my previous video, but it's just this origin of man that we all have always told stories, we have always shared stories, and it's like not coincidence that he gets to take on one of the greatest stories in history, the Odyssey, and gets to bring it and put it on the big screen. And man, he just did great. Talk about the innovation when it comes to using a film camera. You can only shoot like 3 minutes at a time, so you gotta think, like, they're consistently popping in a new film every 3 minutes. And mind you, they filmed over 3 hours worth of film for this movie, and they had to cut a bunch out. Like the total end time was 2 hours and 52 minutes, so they had to cut out a good chunk of what they filmed. Even so, with like using the IMAX cinema cameras, IMAX film cameras, there was a issue with the loud machine of the film turning within the camera, and so oftentimes they could not record the dialogue on set because you would just hear the loud churning of the film inside the camera. Christopher Nolan literally worked with IMAX to make a new IMAX camera, and I forgot the official name that they called it, but the actors on set ended up nicknaming it the Blimp, because there's this massive film camera in this big box, and it's soundproofed, so you don't hear the film churning on the inside, and then you can live record the dialogue. And then then they had another problem where, like, again, the camera was so massive that oftentimes the actors couldn't see their other acting partner as they're recording. So then they built and they put these mirrors on the camera, so then the actors could see the person that they were speaking to within the movie. I mean, like, that is just the lengths that they went through to put this on screen is like very inspiring. As a creative, as someone who someone who one day really wants to just make stories and direct things like that in some way, shape, or form. What I love about Christopher Nolan, he almost seems to have like a theology when it comes to his movies. There's always this cosmic, spiritual, this philosophical, moral understand, or just themes within his movies. And so within the Odyssey, there's this central theme of the golden rule, or they were calling it Zeus's law, where it's this concept of hospitality and treating others how you would like to be treated, welcoming the stranger. And they start that out very early in the movie. I'm not positive how true it is that if there was historically a Zeus's law, but I know at least biblically, right? Biblically, there is, there was a concept of treat a stranger with kindness, because you never know if you're entertaining an angel. Obviously, we know the golden rule. We know the story of the Good Samaritan. So there's this theme of hospitality in this movie. And so when we're looking at the fragmented story, we start out with Telemachus, his son. I think it's like 108 suitors are inhabiting his home because they're looking to marry his wife, or marry his mother, right, Penelope, and they're abusing Zeus's law so then they could have a chance at Penelope. Again, a backstory of Odysseus, and Odysseus is talked about again. He is the hero of the Trojan War, and then the story has all these young boys with him, and they're out on a hunt hunting a boar. He would do this thing where before he would shoot at the boar, he would pluck the string of his bow. They would ask him, like, why would you do that? And he's like, well, I want to be honorable, and I don't want to catch my enemy off guard, and I want them to give them a chance to fight. This scene might seem very insignificant to the overarching story, but it is so pivotal, because then we start to get into the Trojan War, right? And I'm sure most of us know what the Trojan War is. We learned it in history class, or have seen the movie Troy. It's almost still Oppenheimer-esque. The Greek army is not framed as the good guys in this, even down to like the colors that they wear. Like the Greek army, right? King Agamemnon, he wears the dark, almost metallic armor, right? His face is hidden away, right? He has like this, skeletal attachment to the back of his helmet. The army in Troy, they have like these white garbs on, and it's almost like the parallel to like the Greek army. They're not the good guys. What they did was they abused the law of hospitality. The reason why they knew that the Trojan people, I guess it was considered, right, the Trojan people would bring in Trojan horse, because they had honored the same gods, and they were going to save it as an act of honor to bring it in and to appease their gods or whatever. And so they abused their hospitality, they abused their honor to win this war. And then so there's this prophecy in this telling, and sorry, this might be spoilers if you're planning on seeing it. Just go see it, come back, listen, see if you resonate with what I say. But then there's this prophecy of these people of the sea that are coming back, and they're going to destroy the age and bring in a new age, usher in a new age. Even a man like Odysseus, that was once framed as an honorable man, he comes up with a very dishonorable way to win this war. And then that's when we know, like, the Odyssey begins. And he's almost framing in a way where it's like, nothing is going to stop from me and my men from getting home. But then there's this question that's continually posed, that why don't you want to go home? Why don't you want to go home? Why don't you want to go home? When they get to the island and they face the Cyclops, man, that whole segment was freaking phenomenal, man. Like, again, practical effects. Like, they brought in a classic. I forgot his name. I think it's like Steve Irwin. Obviously not Steve Irwin, we think, but I think his name is Steve Irwin. But he plays like all the what's cool is he played the robot in Interstellar, and then he played like a bunch of just different mythical creatures or beasts, whatever, through all types of movies. But again, it was practical, and then they use like the effect where our eyes adjust, and it's like those effects in like the museum where like one person stands in one corner, one person stands in another corner. It looks like the one person is way bigger than the other person. Like, they use those type of effects to get this giant ass thing. And then when they were up close, they made like a lifelike animatronic like puppet, which again, it was insane. But man, like the music in that was tough. Like, Christopher Nolan, shout out to Ludwig. He did like I believe he did the track for Interstellar. I think he did it for Inception. I know he recently did it for Sinners, but he had him do it for this one too. And he was like, no orchestra, right? No stereotypical what you normally think. What you normally think when it comes to this type of movie. I want it to be completely different and use the instruments and the stuff of the Bronze Age of this time. And so they went and they did the research. They read like ancient scripts to learn how to play certain instruments. And man, the sound was so like ethereal, like, oh my goodness. And then the voice of the Cyclops, because the Cyclops could speak, right? And the voice of the Cyclops, and after they like stabbed it in the eye and it was like crying out when it was talking, and what they didn't know is the Cyclops is a son of Poseidon. And it just oh my goodness, man, just like hearing the voice of it in the cave, it was like eerie and just otherworldly. And again, I think movies are just so back, bro. It made you feel something. And again, right, you go through, it's like people like it's the perspective is like Odysseus and his crew, they're not the good guys, right? The Cyclops was just there, right? The sheep, like, were his friends. He was just there making cheese on the island, right? Minding his own business. And they pulled up, and again, right, they abused the law of hospitality. And they got to Circe's island. That was fire. They came and they're like, we're hungry. And she turned them to pigs, right? Because she was like, this is who they really are. And then when she turned them back, they were like, all right, go back into your disguise. Because really who they were on the inside, they were pigs, right? Just ravenous beasts. They didn't care about anything but their own gluttony. Another time, right, Odysseus is having a conversation with Athena, right? And Athena, who's played by Zendaya, is popping up from time to time throughout the movie. He's like, why don't the gods speak in ways that men understand? And she's like, who doesn't understand fire? Who doesn't understand the wind? Who doesn't understand pain? And again, like, it speaks to something that was, again, a scene that might seem not crazy important, eventually becomes, you realize that it is. And so they're going through, and again, right, it's sequence telling, right? Where we know Odysseus is he's on the island with Calypso, and at first he doesn't really have his memory, and we're seeing flashbacks, and then she gives him his memory back, and he starts to recall Troy and the Trojan War, what took place and everything. And also, right, Telemachus goes and talks to King Agamemnon's brother, and he starts telling the story of Troy. And so we know about the Troy and the getting into the Trojan horse and the tactic that they use and so on and so forth. But his brother doesn't tell of the atrocities that happened after they were into the walls and they hopped out. But Odysseus starts to share, and again, they ravaged the city, right? They didn't just kill the soldiers, but they killed women, they killed children, right? They slaughtered the people. And that is why he did not want to come home, because he believed that after he helped commit this atrocity, he dishonored the golden rule, he dishonored he broke the rule of hospitality, and he could not face what he had seen and what he had done. And then Calypso's talking to him, and she's like, listen, you just gotta accept your fate, and you just gotta let it ride out and do what to do. And so he like builds this raft, and he cops on the sea, and he's almost just like on this raft, and he just allows really the sea and the wind to take him. And then once he just allows the sea and the wind to take him, which is a representation of Poseidon and Zeus and whatever, and when he allows the sea and the wind to take him, he finally ends up home. And then he ends up home, and he goes through the tactics of he scopes out the scene, realizes these are suitors, they're trying to kill his son. He meets back up with his son, doesn't reveal who he is, and then his son doesn't recognize who he is until he meets his dog. He sees his dog Argus, and Argus has been waiting for his return. He's lived past the normal life of a dog, right? And and he's been waiting for his return of his master, and his master finally returns, and he finally, passes on after finally seeing. And so Odysseus is acting as a beggar. He comes into the hall, and man, he meets up with Robert Pattinson's character, and Robert Pattinson, freaking goats, man, goat of an actor, one of the best of our generation. And he meets up with Robert Pattinson's character. Now, Robert Pattinson's character, flashback, he was supposed to get enlisted into the Trojan War, and what it was believed was he tried to take another young man's place, but they didn't allow it. But what it came to find out was Sinan, which was a young man, Robert Pattinson's character told him, hey, if you take my place, because they drew lots, he got the lot to go into the war. Robert Pattinson's character, he said, hey, he turned to Sinan, who was not a warrior in no way, shape, or form. He said, hey, if you take my place, right, I'll make sure your father's taken care of, right? Because he came from a wealthy family. Make sure your father's taken care of. And so Sinan accepted that. He's like, hey, my father's gonna be taken care of. I'll go to this war. And they knew, like most of them knew, if we sending their sons were gonna die, for a pointless war, really. What they, what was described for a pointless war. And then so, Sinan eventually dies. Like, he was part of the catalyst that allowed the Trojan horse to get into the walls. And then Odysseus had to go to Hades, and he had to again face all his men that he essentially sacrificed for his own pride, or for, to see victory be won. And one of them was Sinan. And in the realm of the dead in Hades, they talked, and they realized, like, it was what the truth of the Trojan War was, the Trojan horse was. Sinan was just told it was just a normal offering, and he didn't know that there was the men in it. And Odysseus was like, well, it was a lie, because we didn't want you to fold. And Sinan was like, well, why didn't you trust me? And then so he gives him the lot. Oh no, prior he was like, here, take this lot, and make sure this gets back to XYZ. And then so he, back to when Odysseus is coming back home, he gives the lot to Robert Pattinson's character, and he's like, this is for you. And Robert Pattinson's like, oh snap, like fearful, because he never kept up his promise, right? He never he never took care of Sinan's dad, and Sinan's dad ended up becoming a beggar and ended up dying alone, right? Not knowing if his son was going to come back, who died in the war, and was never taken care of. Again, breaking the law of hospitality. And then so, they clear out whatever, and then Penelope, not knowing the beggar is her husband, wants to talk to him again. They are trying to honor the golden rule. And then so there's this door, and they're sitting and they're talking behind the door, and Odysseus, who's acting as this beggar, and he's acting as a guy that fought in the war under Odysseus, and he's Odysseus, and he's talking to her, and he's sharing everything with her, and he's sharing his mistakes essentially, and sharing all these things. And then he talks about, and he says, the prophecy of the men that are coming from the sea to end this age and bring in a new one. And he was like, we are the men. And this, like, one of the twists, he's like, we are the men. We are the men that are going to bring the end of this age. And the end of this age, it was obviously a turning from the Bronze Age to the age of steel, but also this age of honor, this age of hospitality, this age of following the rules and the laws of the gods of their fathers, to something new, right? Now these men, they're pillaging and they're not abiding by this universal, golden rule. And he's like, we are the men that are changing and are bringing in the end to this age, right? They were the ones that brought the own destruction of their age that they were fearful of ending. And then so they go through, and again, it's like, and then he also shows as like one of the biggest horrors is, so the whole time, right, Athena is appearing, and she's only appearing to him, and she's talking with him, and Zendaya is playing this character, and there's this theme, and it's like, a man, a war, a face, right, a horse, a city, and we see the culmination at the end, and we keep seeing this part where a statue of Athena, its head is cut off and it rolls off, right? Every time we just see that. But what we do come to see is that Odysseus, he's looking in horror at during the invasion. He's looking in horror all around, and he's like, "Oh, frick." He's like, "What?" Essentially like, "What did I do?" And we see, right, Zendaya, which is a character, essentially like she's being restrained, and one of the Greek soldiers take a sword and plop her head off. We don't see it, but we see the same sequence of the statue of Athena getting the head knocked off, boom, rolling off, and it shows and so now it's like, oh my gosh, Athena has been taking form of this slain Trojan girl, and he's been haunted by it, because he's like, it wasn't supposed to be this, right? It was never supposed to be this. And so we just see this culmination coming together of like this man who has to, atone for his sins in a way and come back to as like, recognize like, this cannot be, right? We brought the end of an age. And I think this is, again, when I said Nolan has this theology about him. And again, I don't know how true that, the Zeus's law, but I wholeheartedly believe that this is a biblical precedent. This is a biblical principle. And I even see kind of like when a quote unquote downfall of the age, what it remind me of is within scripture, right? Where we would see the nation of Israel depart from the laws and the God of their fathers, right? Yahweh. And every time they would do, it would bring an end to their age, and the world, cities would be ravished, and the world would fall into this chaos every single time. And this is what happens with the Bronze Age and even their cities and things like that, is that they departed from the laws of their fathers, right? The gods of their fathers, and they started to operate and move in something that was antithetical to what it always was, right? This concept of honor and taking care of the beggar, treating others how they want to be treated, right? Not performing trickery, right? Not trying to deceive, but being upfront and up forth with who you are and your motives and what you're trying to do. And the Trojan horse is literally the antithesis to that, right? It's presenting something in one way, but really on the inside you have an ulterior motive. And then when you allow someone to trust you to a degree, what's on the inside comes out and really brings destruction. And man, this movie is like, I really do plan out, I want to go see it again. And then it ends right that she finally comes out and she says, hey, we're gonna get this whole suitor thing over, and I have a trial, and the trial was, if anyone can string this bow and shoot a bow directly through all these axes and hit the boards at the end, I will marry. And obviously, in the movie, it was Odysseus' bow, and he was the only one strong enough to string it, right? He would always, when they would have these feasts, he would allow people to try to string it, and no one ever could, and he was the only one strong enough that could do it. And then he would string it, and he would shoot an arrow through all these axes lined up through the small hole of all these axes and hit the thing. And all these suitors would try to come and do it, and they never could. And Odysseus finally steps up, right? And he like acts like he can't do it, right? And Penelope, she's like, she thinks it's him, and she's like, oh no, it's not. She like turns away, and then he does it, and he flicks the bow, and she remembers, and it's like, doom, and everyone's like, oh, that's Odysseus. And then he's boom, 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 boom. Like he like Rambo. Like it's such a great story, bro. Like it's such a great dad story. Like just it's such a great dad story. Like, coming together, like this man who's a father coming back to his wife, right? Coming back to his son. What I love is like Penelope never wavers. She's like, I've been sitting on this empty throne waiting for my husband, and their son is like, well, what do you want? And no, she was like, well, you got to figure out something. You got to marry, da da da. And she's like, I don't want. He was like, well, what do you want? She's like, I want Odysseus. And I need my wife to will operate with that manner, right? I want Odysseus. But man, I could sit here and just for hours and talk about, man, just the themes, the stories within this movie. It's hard. I'm already at 33 minutes. I feel like I could talk about so much more. This is definitely gonna be a video that I'm gonna save and edit. Like, I'm not gonna post this tonight. I'm gonna post something way smaller, just to keep the streak going. But man, I would encourage you, if you plan on seeing it, you know, at obviously the time this is released, please, man, go see this movie. It is just the pinnacle of, man, what cinema is, man. How it makes us feel, the stories, the thing, how it shapes us, how it makes the mind curious, how it invites us into these worlds and changes our perspectives and so on and so forth. I think it's so far, was 2026. So far, it's movie of the year for me. You know, I think I can't wait to see Dune 3. But this is probably movie of the year for me so far.